with Amy when she was just 9 years old. She came into my wife's dance studio to register as a new dancer. And she was hesitant, yet so excited. And for the next 6 years, she would work really hard to become one of the top dancers in all of the Fraser Valley. She was a leader in the studio. She would lead older kids, and she would volunteer her time with younger kids. She danced with beauty, with grace, and with poise. But her story at school was different. And through my interest in strengths-based education, I sat down and interviewed Amy as a grade 10 student. When I asked Amy about her life in dance, she just lit up. She said, "My life at studio, it's like my family. It's like my second home. I get to be myself." When I asked her about life at school, she sank as she said, "At school, I just try to get through. I just try to blend in, and I just try to be invisible." She went on to share the many struggles that she had in school, academic, social, emotional. She said that she wasn't sure if it was worth it for her to put all that effort just to get through school. This same student that could perform in a theater just like this, at school, tries to be invisible. And we can all think of Amy's in our lives right now. Maybe she's in your classroom. Maybe she's in your home. Maybe she's you. But we can also change that for the Amy's of the world if we shift our focus to a focus on strengths. See, in our current system, we have largely a deficit-based focus in school. We know the many areas in which our kids struggle. And to be honest, we're actually very good at helping kids with those struggles. But what about strengths? If you ask a kindergarten student to list the things they're good at school, you get a lengthy list. If you ask that same student in high school, sometimes it's hard for them to come up with just one. So what happens to our strengths? Why is it that we become so much aware of the many things we cannot do while losing sight of some of the things that we can do? Today, I'm going to share with you the power of starting with strengths and how when you start with strengths, you connect, you engage, and you bring out the best in people. This is not a huge shift. This is just a gentle shift in mindset, in a lens, and how we look at kids. In school, we do acknowledge strengths, but we as adults narrowly define what those strengths are. And if you happen to work hard and be really good in those areas of strengths, you get more points, higher percentages, better grades. And sometimes at the end of the year, if you're really good, you get a big award. But my question is, how many strengths are missed? How many kids go through our school system not being acknowledged for those strengths and not being valued for who they are? We know that you cannot teach a child without a connection. You cannot teach a child without a relationship. And the best way to create that connection is through strengths. If they know that they are valued every day for what they come to school with, for who they are, you have that connection, you have that relationship. And we all have strengths. Every one of our kids that comes to school has a strength. We just have to find it. And you can start with strengths of character. Things like courage, care, curiosity, creativity, wisdom, leadership. These are all character strengths. And Dr. Martin Seligman, who is the father of positive psychology, he tells with us that for too long, we have focused on trying to make people less miserable, to trying to fix them so they suffer less, when what we need to be doing is trying to focus on human well-being, human flourishing. And he says we do this through our strengths. He and his team have come up with a list of 24 character strengths. And their research over and over again shows that when people spend even a small amount in an area of strength, they're less miserable, less depressed, less anxious, more engaged in what they do, and overall happier in their lives. Even our most challenging kids, when we think about them, the fact that they come to school every day, and they do come to school every day, shows courage and care. When we think about those kindergarten kids, when they come, when they're 5 years old, when they're 4 years old, 6 years old, when they come in kindergarten, they all come with a strength of curiosity. I have 5-year-old twins. They are the most curious little creatures I've ever met in their life. They ask hundreds of questions. They're excited about everything from goats to garbage trucks. When we go for car rides, they ask hundreds of questions. And the other day, we're driving along, and one of my daughters is looking out the window, and she says, "Daddy, why are the mountains following us?" A profound question for a 5-year-old. And of course, the science teacher in me, some might call me a geek, starts to go on all about the biology and the physics of vision and sight. And just as I got in my favorite part about depth perception, I looked back and I saw that. Couldn't even captivate the attention of my wife. But my point is that all kids come to school with a strength. And if we can just tap into just a small amount of that, we'll have that connection. It could be character strengths. It could also be strengths of skill. All our kids are good at something. They've worked hard at something. They're confident in something. It could be academics, but it could also be sports, trades, the arts. And as educators, as parents, we need to tap into this to bring out the best in people. And when I say we need to start with strengths, I do not mean that we only focus on what we do well. I do not mean that we tell everyone they're awesome. And I don't mean that you just give an award for showing up. What I do mean is that we want to use those strengths to build up on the struggles. Embrace the struggles and use the strengths to build them up. We want our kids to struggle. That's part of developing. That's part of learning. But we need those strengths. Sometimes our greatest struggle becomes our greatest strength. We want our kids to be resilient. But you cannot be resilient if you don't believe that with effort you can. And you need confidence for that. And the best way to develop confidence is to experience real success. And you experience real success in an area of strength. So it really just comes down to the lens in which we look through, because we find what we're looking for. So what do we see? I had a big aha moment in this about 10 years ago when I met a student named Dom. In my first visit to my new school at Kent Elementary, Dom happened to be in the hallway. And as I was walking through the school, I made just a small connection with a sense of humor through him. So as we were deciding who was going to be in which classes, I asked for Dom to be in my class. After 6 weeks of teaching this grade 5-6 class, I was in my principal, Roxanne Watson's office in tears because I could not figure out how to teach these kids. I couldn't connect with them. I couldn't reach them. It was a gong show. As I went through the many problems I was facing, she said, "We'll start with one. Tell me about one child." I said, "All right, let's start with Dom. He's not reading, he's not writing, he can't do anything, he won't do anything, he's not connected with it." She said, "Stop. What's he good at?" And I'm embarrassed to say, but after 6 weeks of teaching Dom, I didn't know the answer to that. But I was going to find out. So the next day, I met with Dom. He told me about the many hardships that he faces in his life, much more hardships than I'd ever faced in mine. He told me that he travels 2 hours on a bus every day, come to and from school. But he also told me that in his community of Sta'elis, he was a drummer. We also had an Aboriginal support worker named Nelson Leon that was a drummer. So I said to Nelson, what do you think about working with Dom just a few minutes every day? See if we can bring something out in him. He said, absolutely. After only 1 week, Nelson pulled me aside. He said, you got to come check this out. I went into the room, I peeked my head in, and there is Dom, pounding on that drum. It was like his own heartbeat was coming through that drum. Beads of sweat pouring down his face as he passionately sang and drummed. It was a Dom I had never seen before. And I said to him after, Dom, you got to do this for our class. He said, Nelson said, we'll get there. We'll get there. 2 weeks later, Dom did perform for our class. And the kids wanted to be like Dom. They wanted to learn from Nelson and Dom how to drum and how to sing. And so Nelson and Dom started to teach them. And more students got involved. And soon they formed a group called Sacred Connections. And this group would perform to start our week off every Monday morning, and they would perform to end our week every Friday afternoon. They would perform at all of our large school events and gatherings, and they would even perform in front of 500 people at a pre-Olympic gathering in a neighboring community. The best part of that, Dom had a connection. He came to school and he had a different identity. He started to read more. He started to write more. He was a leader in our class. He was a leader in the school. And then the last day of school, as all the kids marched out of the school for summer, and all the buses pulled out of our parking lot, one bus remained. The bus driver came out and said, where's Dom? We searched through the school. We found Dom with a friend in his classroom crying. Crying because he knew he was not going to have that same connection for the next 2 months. And when I share these stories, inside and outside of education, I get pushback. I get pushback from people that say, Chris, those are great stories. And they may work at an elementary school, but they're kind of fluffy. They're not preparing our kids for the big, bad, real world out there. And to those people, I share these two numbers with. When you focus on strengths, you get an increase of over 36% in performance. When you focus on weaknesses, you get a decrease in almost 27%. That is a shift, a swing of over 63%. And these numbers are not coming from my elementary school. They're not coming from a secondary school. They're coming from the Corporate Leadership Council that surveyed over 19,000 employees in over 27 countries, trying to help leaders bring out the best in their employees. Companies like Lego, H&R Block, Caterpillar, Canon, Lowe's Hardware, corporations and companies in this big, bad, real world. Not so fluffy. But these numbers point to a simple message. Starting with strengths works for people, period. It works for corporations, organizations, it works for schools, it works for your colleagues, your students, and your kids. Because isn't that our job as educators, as parents, as leaders, to bring out the best? I mean, part of the root word of education is to bring forth what is within. So what are we bringing out? Chief Marilyn Gabriel of our Kwantlen First Nation says it is our role as elders to find that gift in our children and to nurture and develop that gift over time so they become our future doctors, nurses, artists, and teachers. Rachel Macy Stafford says, in our schools, we have these butterflies. We see them. They're successful. They're beautiful. The challenge is to find the fireflies. Those kids that only shine under the right conditions. And to work hard to create these conditions more often. And we do that through strength-based education. We start with strengths in meetings, in assessments, in projects, in talking about how we honor kids throughout the year. We start with one. We start with one student, and we start now. We form a connection through those strengths. This is James. Last year, if there was an issue with James, I would take 2 steps towards him, and he would do one of 3 things. He would run, he would yell, or he would completely shut down. And his teacher said to me one time, hey, James loves skateboarding. What if he taught you to skateboard? So for the next 2.5 months, James, twice a week, attempted to teach his principal how to skateboard. This year, I don't even have to seek out James. He will find me. Mr. Wejr, how was your Christmas? How are your girls? He is a completely different kid, all because that teacher found his strength and made a connection with that. So we start with one, we form those connections, and then we work to do this more often by creating the conditions to bring out those strengths. We know kids thrive when placed in a leadership role. But when kids are placed in a leadership role in an area of their strength, they flourish. They all flourish. I started this talk about Amy. And now Amy could perform in this theater full of 300 people and capture their hearts. But in school, tried to be invisible. But I never finished the story. I interviewed Amy in grade 10. She struggled in grade 10 but got through. She struggled in grade 11 and got through. She struggled in grade 12 but wasn't sure she was going to get through. You see, Amy's real name is Ashley, and she was a student in the Langley School District. And a year and a half ago, when the TEDxLangleyED committee was putting out names and ideas for student performers, Ashley's name was brought up as a potential performer. And the question was raised, with all of Ashley's serious struggles in schools, is she the right person that we want to put on this stage? Is she the right person that we want to represent our school district? And I still get emotional, but the answer was yes. To know that her vice principal, her principal, the assistant superintendent, and the superintendent all said the same thing. That this is the reason that education needs to change. Ashley is the exact person that needs to go on that stage. We need to work to find the best in our kids, to bring out the strengths. And we do this by starting with strengths. I recently asked Ashley if this moment changed anything for her. She said it was huge for her. She came back to her school and the staff knew her. She got to perform in front of her whole school for fundraising events. And she said for the first time in her high school career, she mattered. Ashley did graduate from high school. She continues to share her passion with younger students. And she knows that when she left our school district, she was valued for her strengths. Ladies and gentlemen, if we want to bring out the best in all of us, we need to start with strengths. So my challenge to you is to start with one, start with strengths, and start now. Thank you.